What really happened to Anne Baxter on the Ten Commandments set?
When Anne Baxter stepped onto the Paramount soundstage in 1955 to film The Ten Commandments, she was walking into one of Hollywood's most ambitious productions and into a career-defining moment that would spark myths for decades. Today, her role as Queen Nefretiri lives on not just in film history, but in fashion archives, TikTok videos, and the annual Easter tradition that keeps bringing audiences back to Cecil B. DeMille's biblical epic.
But the real story of what happened on that set is far more interesting than the scandals people invented about it. From Indiana to Broadway.
Anne Baxter arrived in Hollywood as someone who already understood discipline. Born May 7, 1923, in Michigan City, Indiana, she was the granddaughter of Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect whose name had already reshaped American skylines. That famous connection could have defined her entire life, but Anne chose a different path.
She wanted performance, not prestige by inheritance. At 11, her family moved to New York City during the Great Depression.
Instead of retreating into family wealth, she became a regular fixture in theaters, watching actresses work, studying how they commanded rooms without shouting. By 1936, at just 13, she made her Broadway debut in Seen But Not Heard. Critics saw maturity in her performance, poise and discipline that seemed far beyond her years. When she tested for Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca at 16, she didn't get the role.
Hitchcock felt she looked too young beside Laurence Olivier.
But that rejection led to something bigger. 20th Century Fox offered her a 7-year contract. While other girls her age were still in high school, Anne was already navigating the studio system, building her own legacy. What set Anne apart was refusing to coast on the right name. She earned her place through auditions, screen tests, and hard work. By the early 1940s, she was appearing opposite major stars Orson Welles in The Magnificent Ambersons, Billy Wilder in 5 Graves to Cairo. She proved she could hold her own beside established names.
Then came The Razor's Edge in 1946.
At just 23, Anne played Sophie MacDonald, a woman destroyed by tragedy, falling into alcoholism and despair.
The performance carried a depth that made audiences uncomfortable in the best way.
At the 1947 Academy Awards, she won Best Supporting Actress.
A Golden Globe followed. Overnight, she was no longer just a studio contract player.
She was an actress with critical respect.
But success didn't solve everything. Fox still didn't treat her like their biggest moneymaker. That tension between artistic respect and studio politics would shape everything that followed. All About Eve.
In 1950, Anne got All About Eve only because Claudette Colbert injured her back.
Fox needed a quick replacement, and Anne stepped in. What happened next became one of the most legendary performances in cinema history.
Eve Harrington was impossible. The character had to appear sweet and innocent while hiding cold calculation underneath. And had to show both faces at once, in the same moment, through her eyes alone. The public loved imagining that Anne and Bette Davis hated each other. The truth was warmer. Davis admired Anne's discipline, and Anne later said Davis helped her more than anyone on set. But when Oscar campaign time arrived, Anne refused to be pushed into the supporting actress category. She insisted Eve Harrington was too important to the film. She fought to be nominated for Best Actress instead. The decision cost her. She and Davis ended up competing against each other for the same role. Neither won. Judy Holliday took the Oscar for Born Yesterday. What happened became one of the most famous examples of vote splitting in Oscar history, and it made Fox see her as difficult, as someone who wouldn't play by studio rules. The Ten Commandments, the costume behind the myth. By 1954, when Cecil B. DeMille cast Anne as Queen Nefretiri in The Ten Commandments, she was already navigating a complicated relationship with the studio system. What awaited her was the most spectacular production Hollywood had attempted. A $13 million budget, enormous for the time. 14,000 extras. DeMille, now in his 70s, running the set with relentless control. The costumes became the part of the production that everyone remembers, and the part that modern internet mythology has distorted beyond recognition. When the film opened in October 1956, audiences were shocked by what they saw. Sheer fabric. Bare shoulders. Jeweled bodices.
Nefretiri looked like she was wearing almost nothing. What modern audiences don't know is the engineering underneath.
Baxter herself revealed the truth in her 1976 autobiography. Those scandalous costumes were supported by a flesh-colored bra and matching G-string, both dyed to match her skin tone.
Under Technicolor lights and VistaVision cameras, those hidden layers disappeared.
The jeweled pieces seemed to rest directly on her body.
The effect came from precision, not scandal. Every detail was calculated.
Costume designer Arnold Freeberg and DeMille worked together to create something that looked daring while technically passing the Hays Code.
It was artistry, not indecency. And it worked so perfectly that audiences in 1956 could never quite believe what they weren't seeing.
Today, Anne Baxter's wardrobe has inspired generations of designers, stylists, and filmmakers who look to classic Hollywood for references on how to blend historical drama with high fashion. Fashion publications in 2025 are celebrating how her costumes challenged 1950s norms through implication and craftsmanship rather than explicit display.
The physical toll of spectacle. What people rarely discuss is what happened to Anne's body on set.
Those magnificent Egyptian collars were heavy, hard metal pieces. They would be stored cold, then fastened around her bare shoulders right before filming.
The contrast was brutal. Chilly studio air replaced instantly by lights blasting heat onto the soundstage.
The temperature shock raised goosebumps visibly on her skin, even in close Technicolor shots. So the crew began warming the collars by hand before each take. On her very first day, she had to film an intimate scene with Charlton Heston. Both actors were buried under layers of brocade, wigs, and costume that looked grand on screen and felt punishing under the lights. They had to be convincing, poised, and emotionally locked together while the physical demands tried to break their concentration.
That was the environment DeMille created: precision, control, and relentless pressure.
The myth that never existed.
Modern internet culture has invented a scandal that never happened.
Videos with titles about how Anne was almost banned from Hollywood began circulating years after her death, especially across the 2020s. They slow down the same shots, use ominous music, and claim hidden truths that have no documented evidence.
Search through studio memos from 1956. Check production code files. Look at trade papers.
The real controversy about the Ten Commandments was about spectacle, budget, and religious weight, not scandal over Anne Baxter's costumes. The film cleared the production code.
It passed Catholic Legion of Decency review.
No censorship board shut it down.
No moral outrage consumed the story. The movie went to theaters and became one of the decade's biggest hits.
Since 2006, ABC has been broadcasting the Ten Commandments on the Saturday night prior to Easter Sunday, and this year, the network is showing the classic film a week early, on the first night of Passover 2025. That annual tradition, now spanning over 5 decades, keeps bringing the film back into cultural conversation and back into audiences' living rooms. If Anne had truly been nearly banned, her career would have collapsed. Instead, she kept working. She adjusted with the industry rather than vanishing from it.
That's what makes the invented scandal so hollow. What came after?
Within years of the Ten Commandments, Anne did something shocking. She married Australian cattle rancher Randolph Goldsborough and moved to his 36,000-acre property in the outback, miles from the nearest neighbor. For someone shaped by studios, theaters, and constant conversation, the silence was enormous. The isolation slowly wore her down. By 1964, she returned to Los Angeles alone. But those years became her memoir, Intermission, a true story, published in 1976. She wrote plainly about children, heat, marriage, and the contrast between the grandeur audiences saw on screen and the harder life behind it. When she returned to her career, she didn't chase restored movie stardom. She rebuilt herself through work. She appeared on television when some film stars still treated it as beneath them.
She earned an Emmy nomination in 1969 for The Name of the Game.
In 1971, she played Margot Channing in the Broadway musical Applause, the older woman whose place she'd tried to steal in All About Eve more than 20 years earlier. Time had turned the story inside out, and Anne walked straight into that change instead of resisting it.
The real legacy.
Anne Baxter died on December 12, 1985, at age 62, following a cerebral hemorrhage. By then, the pattern of her life was clear.
She had refused easy boxes again and again.
She chose the dignity of leading actress over a safer Oscar campaign. She stepped away from Hollywood when staying would have been simpler.
She came back on different terms.
When people remember her role in the Ten Commandments today, they're seeing not a scandal, but a masterpiece of costume design and filmmaking craft.
Modern fashion writers celebrate how her wardrobe pushed boundaries while respecting the era's technical constraints.
Social media users engage with cast then and now content that keeps the 1956 epic alive for new generations. The real story, precision over indecency, discipline over scandal, an actress holding her ground while standing in jewels and heat, is far more interesting than any myth.
That's what Anne Baxter left behind.